Hello and welcome to podcast 31 from Football-Oranje, your home of Dutch football, available via YouTube, SoundCloud and iTunes. I'm Michael Statham and as usual I'm with James Rowe and Michael Bell. Lots to get through, as always. We're previewing the Netherlands friendlies with Slovakia and Italy, celebrating the Dutch under-17s Euro 2018 triumph, and answering your Twitter questions sent in, with plenty of reaction to early transfer news, including Marcel Brands, PSV and Ajax. Let's start with the Oranje friendlies, coming up against Slovakia on the 31st of May and Italy on the 4th of June. Fellas, what did you make of Ronald Koeman's squad selection this time round, and do you think there's more experiments this time, or is there a bit of consistency developing?
I personally think there's a bit of consistency, to be honest, with De Rowe and Pluppa once again and Hartebal. But I'm also really pleased for Ruud Vormer, to be called out as best player of the year in Belgium, and he's had a very good season. And as I said before in the pod, when Koeman got the job, this is very much early days, where I think he'll just try to slowly get a nucleus together. And if you look at the names that have been called up, and you look at all the positions as well, I think it's promising signs. And also with the goalkeeper Sergio Pat, I interviewed Wieger Siersma, who plays for MK Dons not so long ago, and he, in his words, Sergio Pat is the best goalkeeper in the Eredivisie, and I would like to see Sergio Pat play one of the friendly games, because when you're going into the Nations League games and the cut and thrust of club football as well, you might not be able to call on Soet or Silersen. So I hope that Sergio Pat plays at least one of the upcoming friendly games.
Yeah, I feel like Koeman's gone for more experience in the squad. He's left out the likes of Kluivert, Till. He's gone for Vormer, who's 30 years old, but you got to look at his stats this season. 24 assists, 14 goals in 49 games. I mean, that's outstanding in any league. He definitely deserves a chance. I'm interested to see mainly where Daley Blind comes back in. Where does he see him? He's not playing for Man United this season. It'll be interesting to see if he sees him as a third centre-back, or is he going to be a left-back, or is he going to come into midfield? But that will be an interesting little aspect on the 3 games. And who's going to start up front? 2 games. Who's going to start up front? It's going to be Memphis and Babel, who did so well against Portugal, or is he going to try and shake up with Weghorst, or even Elia, who's done well in Turkey this season and could make his first appearance in a Netherlands shirt since 2012.
Yeah, the striker situation is an interesting one. Only Wout Weghorst in the squad. He's a recognised striker. It could end up with Memphis starting up front, perhaps in a 2. Considering Memphis' fine form for Lyon this season. Michael, back to Blint. Where would you play Blint, in the midfield, defence?
I would like to see him in a 3 in the centre of defence. Just to experiment with from there, because I think against Slovakia, he could then move into midfield and make it more attacking. And I think he's got the ability on the ball to make things happen from defence. So if you had Van Dijk, De Vrij or De Ligt as a 2, then Blind next to him, then he can step into midfield. I think he'll be strong there.
As for the friendlies themselves then, there's a game against Slovakia and then against Italy. What do we think that both these teams can give the Netherlands in terms of opposition? What's going to be important there?
I think with Italy having a new manager and the seasoned players that play at the top level, I think that will give them a competitive game. And I think with it being in Italy as well, I think the environment of not so much hostility, but going to a big European nation, especially away, I think that may help them in good stead for when they have to play in Berlin and possibly in Paris in the Nations League against France and Germany.
I think even Slovakia as well. They're going to be a tough test. If you look at Netherlands in the past few years, have struggled against teams like Iceland, Czech Republic, Turkey, away from home. Slovakia's in that sort of range, and we're going to see, because Koeman said he's going to stick with 5-man defence. This is a game that on paper you'd say Netherlands would win, but can they dominate with the 5-man defence, or is it going to be how are they going to look against a team that they should be beating? I want to see how he structures it and how it changes throughout the game against a side like Slovakia. I think Italy will be a tough game. They've got a point to prove as well. Both of us not going to a World Cup. It's a new start for them as well, and they'll be very eager to get a first win under Mancini.
Yeah, too right. I think it's about time we saw how Koeman's going to help the Dutch side attack as well as defend. A 5-man defence against Slovakia seems a little bit of a daft decision, but if he can get it to work and get the fullbacks really high at the pitch, it will be good to see how he can adapt to that formation. I'm going to kick off our Twitter questions. Our first one is from David. He does say here, what would you consider to be the main reason behind Holland's failings in international football in recent times? I think actually we've talked about a lot about that on our website in the past and in previous podcasts, and maybe a more positive outlook on that now. Actually, would you guys like to answer what's already changed? Because we have seen the failings in terms of the selection, the quality of players that have been lost recently due to retirement. But what do you think now has got better from these failings?
I think the professionalism of selecting a decent squad, and having a manager that's got experience to know what players to look for and what exactly they need in creating a team in order to be competitive again. I think the Dutch FA really cut their nose off to spite their face when they let Danny Blind have so much time for a manager to only have 1 year experience managing Ajax. To have not enough experience in knowing what a team needs and adapting to different tactical situations, to give him so much time, and then the soap opera of sounding out potential successes and not being direct and not being fully aware of what exactly they want. This appointment with Koeman, although it's come in theory 4 years too late, better late than never. You see, if you look through the latest squad as well, from, as I said just a moment ago, with the positions for the upcoming friendlies, there's a lot more consistency in terms of the sensibility of names that you would pick, and it's still early days, and I think they're on the mend now. It will still take a long time. It won't happen overnight, but they're on the mend to slowly become a competitive team again.
Yeah, I think we won't really know if it's going to be a success until we can see if we actually qualify for the next major tournament. But I think more positively, we've got the right man in charge. He's picking the right players. It's now a team now, I think. There's not really that star name you can pick out. You can say Virgil van Dijk's probably the best player we have, which in the past, you're looking at Van Persie, Sneijder, Robin all being guaranteed a place in the team. Now I think Koeman's got to gel players that work together, and that's going to work well going forward. And I just hope that for once, I know I've said it before, but I think a lot of people underestimated that the past 2 tournaments, the Netherlands have actually had tough qualification groups. France and Sweden isn't an easy group, and I think everyone's like, oh, Dutch football is like a demise of Dutch football, but France and Sweden is not an easy group. We shouldn't just expect to get through these ones. So I think hopefully going forward, we might get a bit of luck, say like England, and get an easier qualification group and reach the final tournament.
I think we've only got more to look forward to as well. The Dutch under-17s won Euro 2018. How good were they? How promising are this group of players?
I think they're very promising. It's difficult to tell at this age group. If you look at the teams that have won in the past, Netherlands won it in 2011 and 2012. Only a handful of players from each side have actually gone on to feature for the full squad. But watching this team, there's a few standouts that look top quality, and a few that I think are actually near and ready for first team football in the Eredivisie. Some of them even already there, like Kenzo Goodman of AZ. He's already made his debut, albeit in a friendly for AZ. I think if you're looking at the likes of Liam van Gelder in the centre back, Dijsselbloem Redan up front, a Hatter on the wing, Wouterberger in midfield, and Ryan Gravenberg, these are players that over the next few years we're going to see in the Eredivisie, definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some absolute stars in that team. And I think, I was talking to you about this the other day, Michael, that Dijsselbloem Redan, the team star player, plays for Chelsea. perhaps could be with Vitesse next season on loan. The fact that he wasn't the standout player just showed how well Kees van Wonderen, the manager, got the team together. And it's so good that he's going to be working closely with Ronald Koeman next season. He's going to add that real team ethic to the whole squad, and it was just so good to see that there didn't have to be a standout player to dig a team out of a sick situation. They knew they could rely upon each other, and if they worked hard together, they'd get a result. They did win the quarter-final, semi-final, the final, all on penalties. There was some luck involved, but I think we would have said that they were pretty hard done by had they been knocked out in the quarter-final, because throughout the competition they were the strongest team. They did have the best-looking players on the pitch, and our standout player as well wasn't Dejan Vadan, who we all thought it would be. We personally think that the goalkeeper, Joey Cordovard, or Liam van Gelder, the Ajax centre-back, were two of the best players. And I think you're right, Michael. There are going to be lots of players that will be playing first-team football next season.
I think it's a real shot in the arm as well for the country. You know, the way that when the ladies won Euro 2017, everybody sat up and took notice. And I think they'll do the same with this young group of players as well. If you look at Kees van Wonderen as well, he's done extremely well to make them into champions. You know, this is a man who had a career playing for NAC Breda, Nijmegen and Feyenoord, and started out as a scout at Feyenoord before taking on under-17s and other roles as well. So I think he deserves a lot of credit, and it'd just be interesting to see the players involved with their clubs like Ajax and AZ, if they get enough time to develop, and if they receive enough confidence as well. You've got the likes of PSV, Ajax, AZ and Feyenoord, but also you've got Mamengi at FC Utrecht and Tavsan at Sparta Rotterdam. So there's be interesting to see how these young players are brought along.
Yeah, let's just hope as well that just because they've won Euro 2018, it doesn't make them the best young players in the age group in the world at the moment. There is a reason why the Dutch under-17 seem to win this competition, and yet then don't end up winning the World Cup, for example, with the senior team. The development somewhere along the line goes wrong. And it was almost ironic the way the Dutch faced Italy as well in the final of that competition. Neither team's going to be at the World Cup. So let's just hope that these players are handled properly, because there is so much potential there, and it's just so exciting to see them play so well. Moving on slightly, but sticking with our topic of young players, we've got a question from Pure Fitball, who asks, how far do you think the Koopmeiners brothers can go? There are two Koopmeiners brothers, Teun Koopmeiners at AZ, as well as his brother Pierre Koopmeiners. Teun has had more first-team action than his younger brother. What do you guys think? How far can they go?
Be interesting to see, especially in the case of the one that plays for AZ. You know, that John van der Brom and AZ in particular have invested so much in youth in terms of a new sports complex and training centre, and they're really reaping the benefits also with the likes of Guus Til as well. So I think with AZ also playing European football this year, that they really believe in the youth setup they've got going, and I think that will pay dividends for them and the Koopmeiners as well as players in future.
I think if you look at Teun and what he's done in the Eredivisie over the past season, he looks a top quality prospect. He's already part of the Netherlands under-21 squad. I think his breakthrough year was impressive. We'll see what he does over the next 12 months of next season. I expect AZ to once again challenge for a top 3 spot next year, even if they lose Johan Bakash. Calvin Stengs coming through, Boadu as well. Also looking at Groneveld of NAC. I think if they can get their attack sorted, even if they lose Weghorst and Johan Bakash, I think there's young players coming through. And Koopmeiners is going to be, the controller of that midfield next season. Per, he's another top talent. He's only in the AZ under-19s at the moment. I think he'll be looking to make his debut for young AZ next season in the Eerste Divisie. Then we'll see if injuries or you know, he might get a chance in a cup game, and we'll see how he does in the Eredivisie next season. But his older brother looks definitely a top prospect for the future.
Cool. One of the biggest topics we've had the past month or so has been Marcel Brand's move from PSV to Everton to be the technical director at the club. We've already talked plenty about how he's going to help Everton develop, but what's that going to leave PSV with? Because, question from Gareth, with PSV losing Brands as sporting director and some have already left, could PSV expect to have a transition season next year whilst they rebuild? You know, who's going to replace Brands? Is it going to affect the squad?
No, I don't think so. I think what's going to happen, the latest here in the Netherlands is what's going to happen is that they're going to have a reshuffle behind the scenes where, for example, they've got the likes of Frank Arnesen and Jan de Jong, who's the main chief scout. I think they're going to have a reshuffle where they're maybe going to ask more of the players, but the people behind the scenes to take on maybe more responsibility and to multitask a little bit more. I received an awful lot of interest from Everton fans on Twitter about the news with Marcel Brands and translation I did with his Dutch media interview for Football-Oranje as well. Everton have got someone who, if they let them get on with the job, can really, really change Everton from the inside in terms of the players they start to attract. And the thing with Brands as well is Brands worked at PSV for 8 years. And you know, it had to take something special to prize him away. But I think when I listened to his interview as well, I think he thought that he's got to take this opportunity because it might never come again. You know, this is a man that when he played in his career for Feyenoord amongst others, never played abroad, and you know, I think he thinks this opportunity can't be turned down. But I think he did ever so well behind the scenes, being the main link between the backroom staff and the playing staff and the board level. And I think just PSV have become so professional, especially in recent years, you know, when they was financially a little bit, they wasn't struggling, but they had to be very, very careful. And in particular with the General Director, Tom Gerbrands, was really, really decisive in making sure that the right people were in the right places. So I don't think you'll see them struggling PSV next year. I think you'll see them making inroads in Europe, and I think you'll see them fighting for the title again.
Yeah, I think PSV will be fine next season, but there's some interesting quotes coming out in the past week that Gaston Pereiro seemed to indicate that he was open for a move and he also said that Brands was very influential to him because he was very comforting of Pereiro when he dropped out of Koku's side. So I wonder if there's a few other players that are looking to exit now that Brands is gone, and they're all hoping that he maybe takes some of them away to Everton. I know Irving Lozano's been linked. Luke de Jong jokingly said that maybe he'll get a move to Everton, but I don't think, you know, he's not really Premier League quality at the moment. But the next man who comes in has got a hell of a job trying to replace him. And it's interesting to see what squad PSV have at the start of next season, but then again, you say the same for Ajax and Feyenoord. They're not exactly stable themselves at the moment, so I don't see a transitional season for PSV because I think they'll start the season as probably favourites. You know, Brands has still got 4 days left that PSV says he's got to try and complete some deals before then. I know Angelino of Manchester City, the left back, he's their main target to replace Joshua Brennett, and they're also looking at Denzel Dumfries of Heerenveen. That's 2 excellent signings if we can get them in.
Yeah, good players coming in, but despite the top 3 clubs usually facing a busy summer in terms of incomings and outgoings, PSV's best players, the players that actually did impress, may all leave. You know, Lozano, Van Hinkel, as well as Arias, Isimat Mera. And it's going to make it so tough to replace them. I'm not really sure whether they're going to get the right sort of experienced players in to deal with Champions League or Europa League football, whatever it may be. And Marcel Brands was really good at getting the right player in. Whether that was Guardado, for example, who was a top quality player for the level of football that PSV play. So I think it's going to be a tough season for PSV next season. I don't think they're going to get the the right players in to replace those that are left?
I think it's still early days in the transfer market, Michael, as well. I think a lot depends on who they'll get drawn against in the Champions League qualifiers. The same goes for Ajax, although in the case of Ajax it's been made apparent they will be drawn against PAOK Saloniki or Sturm Graz from Austria. But it's still early days, and it's going to be an interesting season next year. The managerial merry-go-round as well. There's only one vacancy left now, and that's at Excelsior. And the pace upon which that has all come together has been frenetic. I didn't expect all the upcoming positions to be filled as quickly. I know the clubs have to help themselves, but in the case of Heracles with the German Frank Wilmoth and Lennart Slutsky at Vitesse, I'm not entirely sure if they are the right choices. But I must say, I tip my hat to NAC Breda to get Michel van der Graag in as their new manager, because I think he'll do very well with a slightly bigger budget and the reputation that NAC Breda has. I think that's a very good move indeed.
Yeah, Michel van der Graag, the Excelsior manager, going to NAC Breda. He was my manager for season, for this/last season, whatever you want to call it. And I do think that now he's got a bigger budget to deal with, he can really take that club on. I know I said that about Erik ten Hag leaving Utrecht for Ajax, and I was a big fan of that as well, but I do think Van der Graag has got what it takes to take NAC to the next step, like you say, James.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and I thought your pick last season was also very good. And you got to remember as well, this is a manager that's managed for 5 years in Portugal, and had relatively good success with Belenenses. I think he got them promoted to the first division. And if you look at the other appointments as well, you've got Danny Bouws at Groningen, who's relatively inexperienced, and you've got Jan Olde Riekerink, who used to manage Galatasaray in at Heerenveen. And I feel a little bit for my mate Maurice Stein, because I really thought that the next move was coming for him. But it was very telling in one of his last interviews of the season, where he said post match that clubs have approached him, but it hasn't necessarily been what he wanted. And I think he's done very well to be very choosy, and also as well, I think that's only a good thing for him to be choosy in the long run, and I hope that something does come of it for him eventually. But I'm also quite mystified as to Willem II appointing Adrie Costa. Adrie Costa is 63 years old, and I think he was assistant at Willem II about 30 years ago. And I really thought that Willem II were going to go for Jack de Geer, who lost in the final round with Almere City. So I think some of the appointments, I'm not saying they're bad, but I think a lot of them have been quite rushed, with the exception of NAC Breda. And only time will tell if they turn out to be successful or not.
Perhaps the word uninspired comes to mind when I think of some of these new manager appointments.
I just think they've been rushed, Michael. I really do. I mean, I read yesterday that Nijmegen are in the driving seat now for Jack de Geer. It looks as if he's going to leave Almere City for Nijmegen. He was previously assistant to William Vloet, and he used to train the strikers there. But I fully agree. It's a bit uninspiring, and although we'll have much to talk about over the summer, I know predictions are very, very premature, but if you're looking ahead to managers who I think are going to do well next season, then I would say Dick Lukien of Emmen, Henk de Jong of de Graafschap, and Michel van der Graag of NAC Breda.
I know this isn't what we were planning to talk about in this podcast, and it's probably a little bit off the rails, and we will talk about Ajax transfer dealings very shortly. But I'm just looking at the teams that are coming up. FC Emmen, De Graafschap, Fortuna Sittard. They're not the biggest named clubs, and the players aren't the most well known. And arguably some of the biggest talents lie with teams that are still in the second Dutch division. That, tied with some of the transfers I'm noticing this summer from the likes of Groningen, Heracles, they're targeting players that are playing in the German third division, I've noticed so far. And to me, this does look like a slight weakening of the league, because typically if you're going to have a player from Germany, you normally see the Eredivisie clubs target the lower Bundesliga clubs or second division clubs. But it seems like a very much a change of tack recently from Eredivisie clubs in terms of who they're going to sign. Is that money? Is that a sign of the times once again for the Dutch division?
I think it's a combination of both. I think you've raised a very, very good point in terms of the players they're targeting, but also as well, it's about having the right people in the right places to spot potential talent and to bring them over the line. Marcel Brands at PSV was extremely good with that, and obviously Ajax bringing in Per Schuurs from Fortuna Sittard, and those along those lines. I think it's because here in the Netherlands, if you in an accountancy sense, if your account books don't match and you continuously ignore the warnings put in place by the Dutch FA, if you don't heed those warnings, you can be your professional license can be revoked, and you can be put back into amateur football. I'm not saying that the clubs are necessarily struggling, but I think there's more emphasis behind the scenes at the lower end of the Eredivisie to make sure that the books are all in order so that they don't struggle to meet the demands of the Dutch FA, because the Dutch FA also categorise clubs in terms of financial supervision. And if a club is, when they present their accounts at the end of the year, if something is wrong, the Dutch FA will look at that and think, well, we've noticed that this is wrong, this is what we advise you to do. And I just think I think some of the clubs are being overcautious, especially Willem II. I think they're being overcautious in their managerial approach. I think they're being overcautious with players as well, because yes, they had a very bad season with Owen van der Looy, but it's Willem II have enough in the tank if they get things properly organised to try to get into European playoffs, a la Groningen and Heerenveen. So I think it could be some teams being a little bit overcautious with the financial aspect.
Let's move on then. Let's go to the questions we had in on Twitter, and I think we'll start with Ajax Almaty, because he asked a question about the dealings that the Roma are trying to strike with Ajax's Hakim Ziyech, Justin Kluivert. What is the deal with that? Why are these players so keen to leave Ajax now?
I think in the case of Kluivert, I think there was rumours that they were planning to sell him without his knowledge. I think with him having I think Mino Raiola as his agent, I think that's been well documented. But I also think as well that Raiola is not all what he's made out to be. I mean, I've interviewed Philip Sandler recently, who has Mino Raiola as his co-agent, together with a Rodriguez who used to play for RZ. And when they approached him about the interest of Manchester City, because there was interest from PSV and RZ and other top Dutch clubs, but Manchester City really sold the project to Sandler, and he decided that he wanted to go. I think in the case of AS Roma, I think they're doing exactly the same to Justin Kluivert. I think they're selling the project of what the club wants to achieve long term in terms of stabilising their position, a new stadium, growing as a club, and I think he's interested in what Roma have to say. I think it's likely he will go to Roma. I think it's much more likely than Tottenham. Yeah,
I think one of the worrying things that came out of these quotes is for the future of Ajax is their salary cap. They said that if they wanted to keep Kluivert, that they had to break that, and no player at the club will, can earn more than €1 million a year, which it sounds like a lot of money, but when you think about clubs around Europe at this moment, that's not big wages. And if you're someone like Kluivert, who has ambitions to be one of the best players in the world, if you're getting told that you're not worth, somebody paying just a few thousand more to go over the salary cap, then you're going to look elsewhere, especially if big clubs come and start offering loads of money. And I'm glad he's picking somewhere like Roma, over a Manchester United or a Tottenham or a Barcelona. I think Roma is a good stepping stone for Kluivert, and one where you'll get opportunities in Serie A next season, because I think Roma will sell quite a lot of players that now he reached the final of the Champions League, and he's going to be, all the eyes will be on him. It's just up to him. I think a lot of people are coming out of the Netherlands now, and actually a lot of people are criticising him for leaving too early, but some people say, well, if he thinks he's gone far enough at Ajax, and say Ajax drop out of the Champions League and don't get into Europe next season, what's he really going to learn from staying for another year? Whereas Roma are going to be guaranteed Champions League next year, guaranteed that he's got to come up against tougher defence. It's only going to make him a better player. So I can see why he'd want to leave. In terms of Hakan Ziyech, he's just ready to leave now. He's been in the Eredivisie for years, and it makes sense for him after the World Cup with Morocco that he's going to go elsewhere. He's outgrown the Eredivisie, definitely, and if he does go, Roma are getting a very good player. The quotes in the Italian press say 50 million euros for the both of them, 20 million for Kluivert, which is actually not too bad for somebody that's come into last year, the contract, and 30 million for Ziyech, which is a big profit for Ajax.
I think the profit will be what they paid for him. I think they paid 15 million euros to security services from Twente. Ziyech turned down Sampdoria when he was at FC Twente. He didn't want to go to Sampdoria. I think he may well end up at Roma, but I think this Serie A would suit Ziyech more than Kluivert, I think. And I'm expecting Morocco to have a very good World Cup as well. And be interesting to see if Ziyech replicates the club form he's been showing for Ajax this season, and how many takers there will be for his signature.
I think it also goes to say what you were saying, Michael, is that if clubs around like Groningen, Excelsior, Emmen, all these clubs are going to start signing third division German players, the players that play at Ajax and PSV, they're coming up against weaker and weaker opposition each season, and it's only going to benefit their game to go to these bigger leagues, I think, in the future.
I totally agree. No, that's a really good point, and that's kind of what I was trying to say about the whole league situation, because at the end of the day, the top teams are going to lose these bigger players because they're just going to get so turned off by the opposition they're facing. Unless you're in Europe, you're not going to learn much from playing with like Ajax. And whilst I used to be on the side of Justin Kluivert must stay at Ajax, now I'm starting to think, well, why not move abroad? Why not have that extra challenge? Maybe he needs that fresh start. And there's been all sorts coming out of Ajax, and that interview that I saw with Kluivert, he clearly isn't happy at the club. It seems as though he will move. So if that's Ziyech, Kluivert, De Ligt perhaps as well, all leaving. Cam asked on Twitter, he hasn't heard many rumours about goalkeeper Andre Onana. So why is that? Is Onana going to leave too?
I think Onana wants to leave. I think he's made it quite clear that if a suitable club comes in for him, that he will take the option. With Matthijs De Ligt, I've said it once before on the pod, I think at least one more season here before moving, because I would hate to see a player of his quality sat on a bench at Tottenham, Manchester City or Barcelona only playing cup games or Champions League dead rubbers, because that's no good to him. I think he would I think he'd be a lot better off if he just had one more season here, playing week in, week out, being involved in the national squad. And if De Ligt is going to go somewhere, then I hope he goes to Bayern Munich, because Bayern Munich have also been muted of being in for him, and I think Bayern Munich, in the case of De Ligt, would bring him on. They wouldn't just sit him on the bench to play German Cup games. They would play him in specific Bundesliga games. Yeah,
another player that may leave Ajax is Frenkie de Jong, but I do not think he should be leaving at all. And I think playing with Ajax is something that he definitely needs to do, along with De Ligt. They both need to stay and develop some more. Tweet Mika asked, what will Ajax do if these players that are rumoured to leave do go this season? They've already lined up some replacements. We've talked about Perskurs already, the centre-back from Fortuna Sittard. There's also Lisandro Magayan, a South American centre-back, who's 24, I believe, and he'll be playing perhaps alongside Surs next season. So that's the defence shored up. And then Ajax have been linked with several midfielders to replace some outgoing players. But let's not forget as well that Ajax have got an outstanding academy. They've got all sorts of talents coming through. We saw them play with the Dutch under-17s as well. However, I have got a few doubts about the Ajax academy. Let's remember that Dejan Vadan left Ajax to join Chelsea as a 16-year-old. Let's think why he did that as well. When I spoke to him, he said that he thinks Chelsea is a better place to develop, and he saw the facilities and was very taken aback. And Will used to marvel at Ajax's facilities. So who knows where academies such as Ajax will be in the future?
It's a very interesting point. It really is, and especially if you look at the money that Arsenal have put into their academy as well. I think you made a point about the Argentinian centre back coming to the Netherlands at 24, and Tagliafico arriving last summer. It's interesting that South American players between the ages of 20 and 25, or maybe 22 and 26, are arriving to the Netherlands, and yet young players from the Netherlands at 18, 19, 20 are looking to leave come hook or by crook. I think it's a very interesting comparison, and I think the backroom staff at Ajax and with behind the scenes with Van der Sar and Overmars, Overmars obviously signed Labiat, and they've signed Perschuurs, and it's got to show a bit more intent, and because they haven't won the league for 4 seasons and expectations are high. And yes, the difficulty with Abdelhak Nouri last summer and the upheaval with Marcel Kaiser, but they really expect the 4-year hoodoo to come to an end this coming season. But they will have to start extremely well and continue to add to their squad beforehand.
Yeah, they've already signed Hassan Abande as well he was playing in Belgium last year. He's very highly rated, and that would be a replacement for Kluivert on the left if he was to go. Labiat, I think, is another good signing, and he can come in and slot in where Ziyech was. I think what's important next season is that Ten Hag, he continues to give these youngsters a chance. We saw Mazraoui coming into the side. You've got a few coming through like Sierhuis up front. You've got Eiting in midfield. Perschuurs just joining. It's important that these players get a chance, because then other players in young Ajax or under 19s will see that at Ajax the road to the first team is only going to be a couple of years. If they go to Manchester City, they might end up like Dilro's son, who stayed in the under 19s and under 23s, and now he's had to go to Hertha Berlin. So it's important that they keep giving these academy players game time next season, because there's plenty of them coming through that could make a difference.
2 questions left on Twitter, and I think we should go real quick fire on them. Where do we think Jordi Clasie will be playing next season? Dutch midfielder who was with Southampton, has been playing with Club Brugge on loan. Where do you think he'll be? Do you think he'll be returning to the Eredivisie next season?
I think it's possible. I think maybe a return to Feyenoord, maybe. But it'd be interesting to see if Club Brugge actually want him to stay. I don't know if he's been an important part of their success this season, but he's also been away for a while and was quite unlucky at Southampton. So if I had to pick one team where he may well return, I'd think he may well return to his former club in Feyenoord in that respect.
I don't think he'd go back to Feyenoord, just because they've signed Ayoub, they've got Amrabat, and they still have El Amadi. Unless like 2 of them leave this summer, I don't think there's a place in that midfield for what Clasie brings. Maybe if he stays in Belgium, I don't think he's going to get back into Southampton side, so either Belgium or he's going to get picked up by maybe a mid-table Bundesliga side or a lower Serie A club.
Interesting. And finally, what about Vincent Janssen, Dutch striker who left out the Dutch selection for the upcoming friendlies? Where do you think he'll go this summer?
I don't know. I know he's been playing for Fenerbahce and he needs to play games. Depending on the clubs that come in for him, I think he needs to evaluate well, because if he has a year of playing solidly in Turkey, like Bas Dost had when he was playing for Sporting Lisbon, I think that may well do him good if he's playing regularly for Fenerbahce. I know he's played a fair few games, and it was difficult for him when they lost the Turkish Cup final. But I think he just has to choose carefully. I mean, his rise was rapid and was on fantastic form with AZ before signing for Tottenham, and things can change very, very quickly. So I think if he is presented with new clubs, I think it's going to be. I think he's got to choose very carefully.
Well, he missed most of the season for injury, and I know when he came back, he only made a few sub-appearances towards the end of the season, and I don't think Fenerbahce fans were too impressed by what they saw. So I don't think he's going to go back there. There's rumours early in the season that Besiktas might be interested, and there's some rumours in Spain that Sevilla are after. I think Sevilla would be a great club for him to go to. What's important is he gets regular game time and can try and get back to that form that he showed at AZ. It's not going to happen at Tottenham. So I think Spain would be a good move, and maybe even Germany as well, if he can get a club there.
It's certainly dividing opinion where he'll go next season. I think he'll be back in the Netherlands, and I also think he'll be back with AZ. So there's been a previous podcast. I just think that he'll want to go back to familiar surroundings. He has actually been linked with a transfer to the club since I said that. So who knows, the move could get a lot closer. If AZ can progress in European qualifiers, he might fancy that. He might fancy a bit of European football, going back to where he did so well. And maybe after failing with Fenerbahce, he'll realise maybe it's worth taking a step back to a place where he knows he can score goals.
Can I just make one final point about the playoff winners? I just wanted to tip my hat to Dick Lukien, who managed to get FC Emmen promoted for the very first time. He left his role as assistant at FC Groningen, and he's really come into his own. I've recently interviewed Siersma and also Timo Letschert, who plays for Sassuolo. And when I spoke to both of those players, they mentioned about how good a people manager he is, and that he really gets the players motivated and they really want to work hard. And I think we'll be seeing that in the Eredivisie next season, and also to Henk de Jong, who stabilised Cambuur Leeuwarden and has now got the Graafschap promoted. And I think his stock will rise next season, and I think you'll see the best of him, and I think his reputation will also grow.
Right, nice one, fellas. Thank you again, as always, for listening to the podcast, and thank you, James and Michael, for talking to me.
No problem.
More than welcome anytime.